Hi, welcome to Morning Talk Show. Today is my conversation with Daniel Franzese. Daniel's claim to fame, or original claim to fame, is that he played Damien in the movie Mean Girls, but he came to my attention because he is a co-host of a podcast called Yass Jesus, which is a gay Christian podcast, and I'm fascinated by gay Christianity, and I kind of feel like it gives me hope for the future of Christianity, and I wanted to talk to him about being directly involved in kind of public Christianity, and also being gay and being part of the culture and the group of people that is most stigmatized, one of the people most stigmatized by a lot of Christianity. Unsurprisingly, he turned out to be a fascinating, insightful person. I really enjoyed talking to him, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Please like and subscribe if you want more of this kind of content. And here's my conversation with Daniel Franzese. Danny Franzese, welcome to Morning Talk Show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So obviously, we don't know each other, but the reason that I reached out to you was that... Sorry, I always do a little tiny talk first because we don't know each other. But I've kind of been. Oh, there's some weird sound happening
here on my end.
I don't know. It's like a rumble. No, okay, it's gone now. Okay. Danny Franzese, welcome to the Morning Talk Show.
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, it's morning here. It's afternoon there. I reached out to you because I've just been really moved by the Yass Jesus Podcast. I in the last few years have gone through like a change in myself where I just realized all of a sudden, like, well, first I thought I was becoming an atheist, and I thought I wanted nothing more to do with church. And then quick on the heels of that was like, oh, I'm affirming, like I just love gay people and the energy and everything. And then I found Yass Jesus, and it was like this joyful expression of Christianity that I wasn't used to. And so, yeah, I just basically wanted to reach out because it was moving to me, and it was wonderful. When I discovered Yass Jesus, I didn't even know that you were in Mean Girls. Like it was like,
oh, that's interesting.
I was just a fan of the podcast, and then found out that after following you on Instagram and stuff that you were in Mean Girls, which I rewatched. But yeah, I'm super curious. Like I was noticing Christianity becoming kind of, my experience of it, to be very dour, and I'm still kind of a dour Christian. But what is your, like, how would you describe your kind of arc of your faith, or is that too deep of a question right off the bat?
No, I think I can simplify it. My faith was always very important to me since I was born. My parents, my grandparents are all from Italy, so they were all Roman Catholic. And coming here, after having my parents converted to Christianity. And so that was a very big deal in my Italian family. And they stopped speaking to my dad's parents for a while, and my dad's parents started speaking to them, which is because they converted, they found it as like a betrayal to our culture. Wow. So my parents had like a really spiritual movement within them, but they felt very much closer to God outside of the Catholic Church and more in the Christian church. Yeah. And so when they named me, I didn't have a middle name. I still don't. My name is Daniel because it means God is my judge. So ever since I was young, I was always taught that God was the one that was going to judge me. And so that's something that's been instilled in me for my whole life. I went to Sunday school. I was in youth group and stuff like that. So when I started to come to my adolescence, and I started to hit puberty, and I started to realize that I was possibly gay, it was something that I repressed for so very long. Even though I went to school for musical theater and I experimented, and I all these other kind of things, I still felt like the things that I was doing needed to be repressed. And now what I'm starting to understand is that quite possibly back then, as we're learning more about how sexuality and is a spectrum, that I probably was biromantic, but homosexual. So I was able to fall in love with a girl, but I wasn't able to be sexual with one. So
Ah,
that was what confused my sexuality so much, because I was like, I really am in love with her. And
ah,
so I felt like there was something wrong with me. Maybe I had a demon, maybe I was something in my head. Like maybe so to
yeah.
me, I had my own internal struggle. My family, we have a very large Italian family. My grandfather had 13 brothers, and all of them had kids, and they all moved on the same street in Brooklyn, and their kids had kids. And I have a gigantic family. So we have a lot of gay people in my family just by the sheer numbers.
Yeah.
And they were accepted in my family. I mean, it wasn't necessarily celebrated, but they all lived together. The couples would all live together in their house, and everybody knew them as couples, and it was unspoken about, but they were accepted, maybe not celebrated, but accepted. So to me, it wasn't like a death sentence to be gay, but I think that I had my own inner turmoils, and I put myself into conversion therapy. And so putting myself into conversion therapy is really where I started to get the church hurt and the toxicity of what that is. It didn't come from my family, even though my family was devout Christian. There wasn't that pressure that I was receiving from outside sources.
Huh.
So when I finally came to terms to realize what this was, because I didn't go in saying I'm going to go into an ex-gay camp. I said I need a Christian therapist, but it turned out, but with the topic of why am I having these feelings? So through my grandmother and a pastor, and kind of playing telephone, I ended up in a conversion therapy program.
How old were you at this time?
22.
Okay.
Okay, so I think at this time, like, it was extremely damaging to me, because my mother was my ally my whole life. If anyone ever said anything about me, she defended me. I remember, now being a queer person, when you look back on your youth, you can see those moments where you maybe would have had a realization, or other people could have realized that that's what your path was going to be. I remember one time every single guy had black skates in Brooklyn, and every girl had white skates. And I didn't make that distinction, but I really wanted white skates with Care Bears on them, like my friends had. And my mom bought them for me. And I remember someone saying, like, those are girl skates. And that was the first time I was like, they are. And I looked and realized all the girls had white skates and all the boys had, it never occurred to me. And my mom was like, they're skates. Like, let him do whatever the hell he wants. Like, that was her attitude always about me, And I think I'm so grateful for that. But going into conversion therapy and expressing a lot of this, they informed me that my mother was the reason that I was having gay feelings, because she was too open about stuff like that and sexuality and stuff, and kind of pushed me to remove myself from my really main ally. And so they separated me from my mom, which is what they try to do. It's really weird that for a group of people who claim to follow the teachings of Jesus, when they're constantly kicking their kids out for their sexuality, or judging people, or condemning them to hell, or making judgments based off of rhetoric that has been rhetoric that's been sent to us over and over again from a hierarchy of basically tax-free real estate holders that have politicized queerness so much that they can't back up on it anymore.
And what's so strange is that they will, in terms of parenting, like when someone wants to, when someone wants to have an abortion or give up their child, they feel like, oh, you got to keep your own child, like it's supposed to be this family value thing, where your child needs to be with their family, and their family is always the most important. But then in this case, as soon as it was one of their bugaboos, homosexuality, they immediately undermined your family.
Oh, it's true. I hope that all of their unborn fetuses that they save, they give them the same right to life if they end up being gay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's such a strange thing. I think, you're in such a position to see the hypocrisy, the absolute hypocrisy of what was going on there.
Well, it took a lot of soul searching and a lot of difficulty for me. I never fully let go of God, because God is so ingrained in me. But there were times where I've strayed from God, from living a godly lifestyle per se. And I don't think that I'm not talking about sin or anything like that, because I think that as much as sexuality has a spectrum, I think that spirituality does as well. And I feel like, there are parts of my queerness that are culturally significant. Some of my sexuality is cultural now, and it's due to the way that my elders in the queer community have been forced to live. You know, I mean, a lot of sex happened in dark corners, and a lot of sex was pushed under the table, and a lot of sex was about lust and connection because it couldn't be about love and establishing a life. And I think that there's a lot of that lingers into the gay culture now that I don't think should be condemned, because I feel like it is a part of who we are as a culture. And to me, that, you know, I'm allowed to have my own sexuality. I'm allowed to have my own spirituality. I just want to let young children especially know. And when I say young children, I'm definitely talking about like teens and up, you know, that they should know that it's not a death sentence just to be who you are.
Absolutely. It's so important. And it's like, one of the things that I've noticed with the queer people who've been on my podcast is that there is this, like, what I'm hearing from you is this very nuanced take of where you really are and where you really were. Like, there's a sort of, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost feels like there's an extra incentive for the kind of introspection and really like narrowing in on your motivations and things from the past and things now, because it was so stigmatized. I'm not saying it was good that it was stigmatized by any means, but for example, like I had an asexual person on the show, and he was saying like his relationships are all platonic, but he had really thought about platonic relationships, you know, like he'd really gone deep, way deeper than any default heterosexual Christian that I've ever seen on what that type of relationship would be. And like even hearing you say that that you
well, my friend Christine Sidelko is asexual, and she always says my nipples only get hard for the wind. You know, she's never had a sexual thought or feeling, you know.
Yeah.
And a lot of diehard Christians who believe that homosexuality is an abomination because it says so in the Bible. But what's interesting is it was added into the Bible in 1946. So that's interesting. You know, the word homosexuality never appeared in the Bible. There wasn't even a name for that in biblical times, but that's another whole conversation.
Yeah.
But, you know, if that's the claim, then they're claiming that Jesus was asexual, which means Jesus is LGBTQ plus, and, you know, and part of protected under the LGBTQIA rainbow. And it's so sort of like, you know, you're attacking the very person who you worship in a way.
Yep.
And, you know, Jesus ran with sinners and thieves and and murderers and prostitutes, and, you know, that's who he was around. You know, he
Yep.
wasn't hanging in the church with the rabbis. You know, he was fighting with them, if anything. And so
Yep.
I feel like there's a lot of hypocrisy. I think what's happening here are a few things. One is, I think people are trying to compare their sin to other people's sin, because if they feel like, as long as I'm not gay, then I could do all these other things because that's like worse. And they're lining gay up with crazy things like pedophilia and bestiality, you know, and horrific thing, and rape and incest, and they're putting it in these categories. But then, you know, to make it okay for them to covet thy neighbor's wife. But, you know, Jesus never said nothing about gay people, and there is nothing in the 10 Commandments about being queer. But there is about adultery, about, you know, about coveting people's wives, about lying, about stealing, and all these other things.
Yeah.
A lot of the finger pointers probably have partaken at some point. So I feel like there's a lot of hypocrisy there, but also we're learning it's a spectrum. I saw a funny meme the other day that said 52% of women would kiss another woman. And they said 52% of straight women would kiss another woman, which lets you know that 52% of straight women aren't straight.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like when you're really thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we all live on this kind of spectrum. I mean, as an AIDS activist, which is a lot of my work I do with Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, I've come to find out that you know, there's tons of men who sleep with men but won't identify in any way as homosexual because they're not homoromantic. So
Right.
so they are considered and labeled by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, as men who sleep with men, MSM. It's a completely other subcategory of men who actually are in highest risk of HIV. But they are a completely other subcategory who don't want to receive the stigma that it takes to be gay, but want to tickle their pickle.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that really, I find it really interesting. And I've often wondered, like, how would things settle down and balance out if we really did just remove the stigma from all types of romantic relationships and sexual relationships? Where would it actually settle out? We don't really know the numbers, like we don't know there's, I mean, for every gay and trans person, there's almost certainly thousands of them, and some of them are probably closer to the center of the spectrum, so they're able to kind of toe the line, even though they're
Who's
feeling
to say? I think that again, spectruming and sort of trying to figure out where people lie and labeling people and everything is sort of like not considering the fluidity of it all. I think that there are people who are one thing one day and one thing another day. I think that really, if you're centering things around love, it's a pretty broad, open thing.
Yeah.
And if you're centering things around sexuality, it's another. I mean, look at how many straight identifying males engage in homosexual sex when in jail or in an all-boys school or in the military or in places where they're confined and they don't have an opportunity to be around a female. There are still sexual urges that can be fulfilled that necessarily aren't romantic ones, and vice versa.
Have you ever read that C.S. Lewis book where he talks about the whole system of basically I can't remember what they're called, something like twinks or something in boys' school that he went to? It's in a C.S. Lewis book. I was shocked. I was reading it, and it's all about how there were these like little effeminate boys who were owned by other boys, and these things. Yeah, you're right. These things develop whenever there's a closed system. Yeah, it's so interesting to think about. Like the labels really do become oppressive, and I think one of the reasons that I don't know, I always wasn't quite manly enough, and I think that's one of the things that kept me open to eventually one day being affirming, because I just am naturally not so full of testosterone. And I feel like I'm pretty straight, but it's interesting. Sometimes when I'm watching a Tom Hardy movie, I'm kind of like, I'm like, oh, I don't know, but anyway, that's a whole other.
The feeling's probably mutual. I think
he likes me a lot, but I avoid his text though. I like to be withholding. Anyway, go ahead.
I think it's interesting. There's so many hangups. I mean, when you think how much if people could just like open themselves up, like I think people are afraid that they're going to be attracted to it. I think that's the big thing, because somebody who is straight identifying will most likely be attracted to gay sex because it's two people connecting sexually. Like I'm gay, but if I'm in a hotel room and there's a straight couple having sex next door, I might get aroused from the sounds that you hear
right.
Because it's just hot. And I think that they think that that's somehow going to convert them or make them change, or maybe they have a sex dream, or maybe they masturbate to it or something, and all of a sudden they see it as this like gateway to something. So they don't understand a person who is born only that way. They think, no, you heard it through a hotel room wall like me and got a little brick downstairs, I think that's what they're thinking. But really, in actuality, they're just not open. All human beings are going to connect to other human beings having sex. It's like low-key, just like, I mean, I'm not into bestiality at all, but sometimes when you see two lions going at it, you're like, damn, he's getting it, like, it's like, it's human condition. It's animalistic, human mammal condition to like be aroused by sex. So I think that that's like a big problem that a lot of these people have. They're hung up on it.
Well, I think that that male and female, heterosexuality, it has just kind of, not necessarily by virtue of what it is, but it's become like one of the categories that simplifies life down, right? And so as soon as you start to take that away, people who want to think of life as very simple, they all of a sudden they're not like, well, if that's different, then what else might be different? Maybe I'm wrong about everything. And they're just, their initial reaction is anger and frustration.
I think there's nothing gayer than straight guys. All of their heroes are men. All of the people they listen to sing are men. All of their movie stars are men.
Yeah.
All of their friends are men. Like, it's like, so there's so much men around them all the time. It's like, yeah, it feels gay for them to like Beyonce or something. It's like,
What?
it just doesn't make sense.
It feels gay for them to watch the sexiest woman in the world.
Yeah, something that really confused me is like, this group of like seemingly homophobic guys in high school, I remember, who were like disgusted by the idea of two men kissing in something like Brokeback Mountain or whatever, but then like can go and brag and talk about how hot lesbian porn is. I'm like, you do realize you're watching gay sex. Like, I mean, it may be which one's more sinful, if you're trying to count sin, like, two men in a committed relationship in love with each other trying to start a family, or somebody who's masturbating to two women who probably aren't even gay, that are having sex for money.
Yeah, they don't even know each other.
I mean, it's like, and I'm not even saying that is a sinful thing either, but I'm saying, right, like to on their scale, on their measurements, it doesn't make sense. I'm like, I'll play by your rules in an argument or a conversation, but your rules are illogical.
Yeah, totally. And you're right. The only person who ever blocked me on Twitter is a guy named Owen Strand. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's like, I don't know what. He's part of the super masculine Christian super conservative culture, and he posted a picture of Tom Hardy in a bomber jacket, and he said something about manly bomber jacket or something, and I just replied, I was like, I'm also attracted to Tom Hardy. Instant block. It's like, oh, come on, man.
He just needs a good blowjob.
Yeah, it's like you're posting a picture of a gorgeous man instead of, I guess he can't, but that's the other funny thing about that culture. He could never post a picture of a gorgeous woman who was, on the internet, but he can post this man who he's clearly on some level he's attracted to, even if it's not sexual, like.
Well, to finish my arc of my spirituality journey, just to jump ahead a little bit to like Yass Jesus, I started realizing, my friend Azariah Southworth, who's my co-host on the show, like,
he's great.
we were talking about God, and we'd like smoke weed, and like we'd like just like wax poetic, I guess, on like Bibles, and we were on Bible stories, and we were like, we need to like have other people hear some of these conversations that were happening. But in my research, I started to realize that there are queer perspectives in the Bible. There are queer stories. They existed. Obviously, there's gay energy in there, and for it to like be in there and not be discussed, I think does a disservice to the Bible. Some of the stories, Joseph and the dream coat, his Technicolor dream coat, like that story, the coat wasn't actually a coat. And according to an early translation of the Bible, 46 AD, I believe, or 48 AD, it was a ketanit pasim, which is only mentioned one other time in the Bible at Tamar's wedding, and it is a princess dress that a virgin princess is given by her father on her wedding day. So Joseph wore a rainbow dress that was meant for a princess that Jacob probably picked up in his travels. So that's why he got beat up by his brothers. His brothers were working in the fields, and he shows up in a rainbow dress with long hair, and he got his butt whipped because maybe he was genderqueer, or perhaps, dare I say it, a trans person of color. We're the most marginalized person in the world right now are trans people of color, and here's an opportunity where the Bible shows a story about one, and it's not even brought up, it's not even mentioned. I think that does a disservice to the word, because I really feel like the Bible is for everyone, and it is a reflective text. So I might look at that Joseph story and read a genderqueer story, but maybe my father might read something different, but it's meant to be that way. Yeah. And I think a lot of the people who read it and absorb it and finger point and don't let other people touch it or question it, are the part of the problem. And I think that's a huge deal with the Catholic Church, is they don't let you read it. They don't want you to interpret it. They're like, this is what they meant, But a lot of times that stuff is decided by the Vatican, and it's decided, which is almost like the Roman Empire itself, or like a mafia. That sort of controls how people feel or think about the text. And I do not think that that's all how Jesus taught.
Yeah. It says that God doesn't speak to us through the Bible personally, right? Like the Bible, that what they're saying is that the Bible, like your experience of the Bible is totally irrelevant. It's a rule book, but it's hidden, but it's kind of obscured. So you need us to tell you what the rules are based on this book. which I find that, I find that very unsatisfying as well.
We had a guest on our show who said the biggest disservice that man has done to the Bible is put a back cover on it. Like, just because, people were done writing doesn't mean God was done talking. Like, the world changes and the world evolves. And, back then men had to own land, and we had to populate the planet, and we have a different set of problems and a different set of things, and equality, and a bunch, and just mental evolution that has happened since then, that it's a little queer, for lack of a better term, to not address it.
Yeah, even in the Bible, there's a major evolution between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And Jesus, I think, like, if you're looking at it, Jesus says, like, okay, I'm going to go now, and I'm going to leave my spirit, with you to, to test these things, approve these things. Like, my spirit is going to be the thing that, that makes a difference. Like, you were talking about God. You grew up being with God as your judge, and that's what your name means. But, like, the interesting thing is how that can kind of flip to where now you can say, yeah, God is the only one who is qualified. At the beginning, they tell you God's a judge, so don't fuck up or you're in trouble. And then now you can kind of say, no, God is the judge, and so I will
answer to just him. Yeah,
exactly. The other thing that comes to mind as you're talking about all this is, like, something that's been sort of hitting me recently as I'm trying to, I guess I'm a deconstructed Christian or something. I hate the term in a way, but reading the story of Jesus, it seemed to me that no matter who it was, Jesus was totally present with every person that he met, and so often did things like miracles and things like that were outside of his original plan. Like, when he got up that morning, he wasn't going to heal a dead girl, but he met a person and he saw their pain, and he looked in their eyes, he saw their pain, he wept for people, and he helped, in the way that he could. And to me, that's like, it's so not moralistic, it's so not rule book thumping. This seems like that all, everything Jesus said, his whole story seemed to be like flying in the face of the rules or something like that. It was more like people caring for people, loving people, and I think that's really, that comes through very clearly in Yass Jesus, that is what your desire is. So yeah.
I think we also just want to have fun with it too. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's ultimately it is a comedy podcast too, because it's just like, we want to be silly, we want to be able to say all that, all the fun stuff too, because we want to be like who we are in our daily, we want to be who we are in our daily lives just all the time. It's not like, I hate the pretense of going to church and wearing a suit and being cleansed and clean, and then going and being running around and like beating my kids and yelling all this shit and getting drunk every night or whatever during the week. It's like, if I'm going to do all of those things, do them in front of God. He's watching anyway. It's like, so that's why we're like, oh, we'll smoke weed and curse and make jokes and flirt with our guests and do all of the things that we do in our regular life during this. And that's where the comedy lies in it, because it's just sort of irreverent, I guess. But like, I think that's the part that we're trying to really focus on, because we're not really here for like those, I forget what you call them, the dour, like, like, we're not here for like the puritanical people. We're not here for the perfect people. They have a whole support system of other zealots that they can talk to. Like, we're here for the ones who were told that they weren't good enough for God, because that is like, that those are the people who need God the most. We need God in our lives. Something that's so strange for queer people is that, like, you get told you can't have God once you come out of the closet. Like, once you become gay and once you decide that you're going to live a fully authentic life, they're told that God can't be a part of that. Right. And so many gay people say, okay, well, I'll move God into my life then.
Right.
And it doesn't make any sense to me, because if you ask them what their pride with their prized possession, as if they're like, oh, my Louis Vuitton clutch all, or oh, my little dog Rocky, or whatever it is. If I tried to take Rocky or that bag from them, they would like scream and call the police and stop. But you just let someone just tell you that you can't have God, and they just take your God away.
Yeah.
Like it's just the biggest lie. Like it's the biggest lie that they're not welcome in the house of God.
Oh, totally. And the lie is you can't, even though God says approach the throne of grace with confidence, that God says in the Bible that you're supposed to bring who you are, bring yourself as you are right now. And then it's humans that say, don't bring that shit here. Get, you know what I mean? Like even people who aren't gay don't feel they have anything to hide. You're saying, they go into church and they hide things, and they're not dressed up out of reverence, because that would be beautiful. If somebody said, oh my goodness, I'm going to be in the presence of the Most High, I need to put on a suit, because I feel this great sense of respect, but not like, oh, if you don't wear your best stuff, like you're gonna get condemned.
Yeah, they treat it like a fashion show. God doesn't care if you're there in your pajamas and your Crocs. He doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, I think that I do like praise and worship. I do like being around a community. I do like lessons from a learned person who's studying and specifically vibing on their congregation in mind. There's always a message that hits me when I go to a church. But there's so many unaffirming churches out there that are that pretend that they are. There's a lot of this new Christianity where the church sounds like a gym, like it's energized church or flash church or pump church or something, like, and they sound like a club or a gym, and they'll let you walk in with your partner holding hands, and they'll let you sit in the front row, and they'll let you contribute to the bake sale, and they'll take your pink money every Sunday in the collection plate, but they won't let queer people, LGBTQ people rise to roles of leadership or attend their schools or their camps or their classes or whatever, because the policy of their greater organization, a lot of pastors' checks are getting cut by the denominational hierarchies. And so, I had one church that's such a great church, I think, here in South Florida, and I went to it, and I asked online when they had an online service, I was like, are you gay affirming? And they're like, everyone's welcome here. I said, yeah, but are you gay affirming? And they were like, well, I don't know about policy, but the pastor loves everyone. And I was like, that's not enough.
Right.
It's not enough. And honestly, like, it's harder for gay people to make a change. We just did, I think last week's episode is how to make your church more welcoming, because we're trying to get people to realize like how important that is. And and how important it is for straight allies as yourself to give people voices in their community to realize that they could make a change, because at the end of the day, a pastor is going to listen to what the congregation is asking for. So if they're just silent on the issue and they're not trying to make a change, then it's not going to happen, Yeah. But if they say, hey, because one of the arguments we had early on in season 1 of Yass Jesus was if we had a fictional conversation with the fictional pregnant mother, and it was like, are you gay affirming? Yes. Are you a Christian? Yes. Are you going to raise your child in the church? Yes. What happens if your child is 13 and says or 16 or whatever, and says to you, I'm gay? Well, I'm going to love my child no matter what. Great. Well, what if your church isn't accepting? Well, then I'll go find a new church. Well, why don't you find that out now before you raise your child for 16 years in a non-affirming space that could have all these microaggressions and lots of church hurt and lots of things that are ingrained in their brains that you don't realize. And I think it's just because they're not thinking like that. And it's up to us as queer Christians to sort of let our straight allies know that that is something that we need from them right now in this day and age. Like in this time, it is a holy war. And the hypocritical patriarchy is literally controlling so many things. The Catholic Church right now has a pretty affirming Pope who just this week said that if parents, again, reiterated that if parents have gay kids, they shouldn't kick them out of the house. He's also said that gay people should not be made miserable of it. God loves you the way they are. But then has to come up with a statement that says the Vatican will never bless same-sex unions because sin is sin and they'll never have sin in the house of God. So it's like, as soon as we move one step forward, we got to go 3 steps back, because it's like, because of how the groups that are controlling the pastors and the Pope and the people who are all speaking, it's those groups, it's those committees. And a lot of that is run on the political movement of money, because they're tax exempt organizations. The number one real estate holder in the world is the Catholic Church, with millions and billions and trillions of dollars worth of like historical lands and churches
right downtown in big cities. And
exactly, huge blocks, that and historical buildings and art and stuff, and the value. I mean, it's not even quantifiable what assets they own. And then they're also opening the door for a lot of cult organizations like Scientology to be able to do the same thing by following their evil models.
I was thinking of Scientology, because they got their tax exempt status too, and they're huge landowners.
Sure. And the Mormon Church and other places that, sort of do things where they exclude groups of people, make decisions that aren't biblically based, and use real estate and power to push. The Mormon Church in Utah put millions and millions of dollars into the vote on banning marriage equality, the Prop 8 vote in California from Utah, because they were pushing their money across state borders in order to be able to block protections against LGBTQ people. This is power. This is like the power dynamics of money. And a lot of it is, they say money is the root of all evil. Like, to me, like, a lot of that is really coming from a different place. And I don't think that really young people have that kind of a scope of perspective on how churches work. So they're just taking it as the word of God. And I think that that is really like the worst thing that anyone could be doing. I actually pray in fear for the souls of those people.
Yeah. Like it's so true. We're at a point now where it's less and less cool to openly say that you're not affirming, but the money is still with in every church that's not affirming. Probably the bulk of the money is in the pockets of people who are not affirming. And I don't even know if, like, I think that the evangelical church has created enough of a smokescreen in the minds of their own pastors that they aren't thinking of it. They don't think they're being calculating to that degree. Like, we left a church for partially for this reason. And when I think about the pastor there, I'm sure he doesn't think. Like, he drives a modest car, right? He's not a flashy guy. I don't think he's tying it to money, but I think he needs to realize that that's really what it is. It's like, it's democracy and capitalism infiltrating the church, like, as much as it is anywhere.
I mean, Joel Osteen's church, has been under fire for the past several years. I mean, during Hurricane Irma, I believe there was like a point where people wanted to seek shelter inside his newly renovated $1 billion church or whatever, and he wouldn't open the doors, and then in one Sunday they found millions of dollars missing. That was probably some kind of inside job. They found millions of dollars missing, and their insurance covered it all. It was like $4 million from one Sunday's collection, one Sunday. And then recently, months ago, a plumber found thousands of dollars behind a toilet of checks and money that was just shoved in the wall behind the toilet, of checks, even, like, which is so crazy to me.
I heard that on your podcast.
Oh, but this is the kind of thing, like, this is really, and Joel Osteen also signed the Nashville Agreement, saying that all of these major churches are not gay affirming, and these people are still strong voices in controlling many civilians' feelings about homosexuality.
It's true. And, like, I think what has happened with this real kind of moralistic, trying to view the Bible as a rule book thing, is that people have become totally untethered from the actual idea, from the tone of sin, from the feeling of sin, from the like, what's behind the rules about sin, right? Because you see abuse can be totally rampant in these churches. And like, if anything is a sin, it's abusing power against another person, right? And as a gay or straight person in any kind of sexual relationship, there's a power dynamic, and the sin is in manipulating and abusing and unkindness and gaslighting and you know.
Again, I'm not one to judge people, but those are the exact things that Jesus spoke about that were wrong.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about following the teachings of Jesus Christ. Like that's what we're speaking of, and speaking upon. And those are the teachings of Jesus Christ. Jesus did not teach about queer people.
Yeah.
If anything, he taught love and acceptance of all. And so to me, it's just insane. I mean, I drive by, there's an abortion clinic like near where I'm staying down here. And there's always like at least one woman outside with like a sign, and I'm just like, to me, I don't know why people don't look inside and just worry about themselves. You never know what people's situations are, and I'm somebody who's like personally pro-life, but politically pro-choice. Like, right. I think that everyone should be like, I wouldn't want to do that. And I would hope that like my sister or, friends would make different decisions, but I would never make it law to govern over someone else's body.
Right.
And I think that, we're just in a position right now where, especially for queer people, we're making a change. We're discovering so much. The Black Lives Matter movement was really informative for a lot of people. It still continues to be, but I was learning so many things, like, in school here in America, they teach us that like, George Washington had wooden teeth. How funny is that? Ha ha ha. But when in actuality, he had wooden gums and teeth from his slaves, and like, what? Like, I actually remember like coloring, like, or cutting out or doing something with wooden teeth when I was like in elementary school. Like, why perpetuate these lies to us? And if we're learning everything this way, what is the truth?
Right.
And now there's this huge battle going on right now with the far right Christian movement and with critical race theory. And I think the same thing comes with LGBTQ. I mean, here in Florida, they just passed the say no gay or something like that. I forget what they call it. Rule where like you're not allowed to speak on gender politics or LGBTQ issues in a school, based on a Florida bill. They're really doing their best to halt educators from doing what they need to do, which is to help a child grow up with the knowledge to be themselves unabashedly and, and successfully, and be able to survive in the world. So many people don't seek further education, and the knowledge that they're getting socially, politically, and mentally are all coming from high school. So it's like when you're ingraining some of these thoughts that are being governed by a body of conservatives that's all politically motivated, and politics is money. It's all motivated. People are signing bills and doing things and supporting things they don't even believe in, so people will give them money for their campaign. And so it's just a horrible place that we just need as many voices as possible, and there needs to be a very strong sense of community. Like, one of the big feedbacks that we get from Yass Jesus is just, wow, I'm in Tokyo, or I'm in Chile, or I'm in Estonia, and I'm picking up your podcast, and I don't feel alone anymore. And it's not even just mine and Azzy's voices, it's the people that are calling in and leaving messages. We have on our website, yassjesuspod.com, you could leave a message at the bottom for praise report or prayer request, or even just say hi or whatever. And just playing some of those voices on the air really is comforting to so many other people.
I mean, what comes to mind when you're saying all that is like the church and the United States are both things that have this beautiful potential that's not being reached because they won't look at themselves, right? And you've looked at yourself. You've really reckoned with yourself and thought about yourself, and maybe some of that wasn't even from, was more than you should have had to do, maybe, but at the same time, this is what we need to do, is look back at our history, right? Look at those wooden teeth, and don't be offended, say that, okay, like if there's something with this country, or if there's something with this church, then it's not going to evaporate if we try to look honestly at it.
It's a
right?
difficult challenge for LGBTQ people because we literally lost a whole generation of people to AIDS. We lost our scholars, we lost our writers and our teachers. I'm 43 right now, but when I was younger and coming out like around 21, 22, the time I was putting myself into conversion therapy, the generation before me was either gone or traumatized still.
Yeah,
It was only 10 or 15 years ago when all
decimated.
of that had happened,
Yeah.
and I remember seeing blank stares in queer people's eyes that were older, at the bars and stuff like that. And I felt like they were dealing with the trauma of going to 6 funerals a week or whatever they were having to deal with at that time, when I hear the horror stories that I hear
And no
of
support
that.
outside their community for any of it.
Absolutely not. And in the beginning, in my 20s, I went to several funerals, and so to me, it's like, I think the new generation that's coming about, the euphoria generation that's just coming out, and like whatever, boys are wearing mini skirts to school. It's all great, it's all cute, but you have to realize the power that is behind that, and not to lose sight of the important things in life, like education and spirituality and human connection to people that you don't want to have sex with. I think that there's a huge, I love the sexual liberation front. I mean, PrEP has given pre-exposure prophylaxis, the drug that you take once a day, that I take once a day, that most gay people now take, that prevents you from getting HIV transmission.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So yeah, you could take a pill every day and you can't get HIV. And now Moderna is working on like a 6 to 8 month injectable vaccine,
Yeah.
based on their technology, to be able to change that pill from every day to being once or twice a year, and so that's given such a new sexual liberation front. I played a character, an HIV positive character on the HBO show Looking.
Okay.
And when I was playing that character on that television show, I was the only character on TV with an HIV storyline for 6 years. And so since we found out about HIV, like literally in the 80s when they found out about it, every year the infections went down. It started out as this mass pandemic that slowly got lower and lower and lower until they stopped showing it on television around 9/11, actually. And that's when it started going up, 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 up again. There was a rise in new infections every year because the schools won't teach it. There's no comprehensive sex ed education. They're not talking about it in the church. The parents aren't bringing it up in the home. And, there's some students in the South that don't even know what HIV is. And I think that is, we've failed as a country,
Yeah.
because most of the drugs that are made to aid and prevent and all of the stuff for HIV are made here in the US. And we are still like on a scale under some third world countries on the
Yeah.
rises in new infections.
Oh, wow.
And the highest risk is Black women, because a lot of the men that they sleep with are the MSM men who are, because Black and Latino culture don't, and a lot due to religious oppression, don't want to identify often as homosexual. So
wow.
they'll say, they call it the down low. They'll be like, oh, I sleep, and this is a real statistic. This isn't me generalizing or marginalizing a group of people. This is a real statistic. 50% of gay Black men, at the rate that they're going right now, are going to have HIV in my lifetime.
Wow. Say that number again. 60?
1 in 2, 50%.
Wow. 50.
And 1 in 3 Latinos.
Wow.
So this is a big problem.
Yeah.
And the most risk is again, Black women, and Black trans women. Those are some of the most high at risk, but Black
I had no idea.
cisgendered women are like the most endangered of HIV.
Didn't JVN come out recently as being HIV positive?
I don't know. I can't really speak on that.
You know what? I shouldn't say that kind of shit without knowing if it's. But that's my recollection. Anyway, he made a statement about. I would love to have him on the show, but he made a statement about it, and I'm pretty sure that's true. Fact check me, anybody watching this, but I'm gonna check it out after and maybe edit this out if it's not true. But yeah, like when he said that, I was I was ignorant, like you're saying. Like I was totally ignorant that it's that the numbers are in any way rising and that it's still a problem. Like it's been kind of swept under the rug, it seems, which is too bad.
Yeah, and I also believe JVN is a they. or they them.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not know that. Okay.
It's okay, but see, this is how we learn. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong. There's no shame in this conversation. Like, this is the kind of things that people are afraid to speak upon and learn about. My mother is asking me the best way to ask about gender pronouns, and I'm like, it's to ask.
It's to ask.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I never get offended, and I don't think anyone would be offended if you're like, so. And I've actually watched like people handle it, because it was a little difficult for me to handle with a friend of mine who transitioned, because it was just habit, like,
Right.
not that I didn't acknowledge their existence, but it was just habit to say she, and then now, and then they, and then now he. And so for me, it was like a difficult thing. But I watched someone walk in the room and say, hey, everybody, we were going to watch something on TV. And my friend was like, hey, everybody, just before we get started, it's everyone's pronouns, and it was just like out of the way.
Yeah.
And then we moved on, and we forgot that moment happened, or maybe my friend felt relieved that had happened, but it's just a way to get it out of the way.
Yeah. No, that's good. And thanks for correcting me on that. I wasn't aware, but I am. Yeah. One of the things I think people forget about things like pronouns is that pronoun culture and asking pronouns and stating your pronouns is just one more little reminder that each person, regardless of if they correspond with how they physically look to you, each person really is a mysterious and exciting landscape for you to learn, and I like the idea that of everybody approaching everybody as like, okay, like, show me who you are, reveal yourself to me. I'm not going to bring my assumptions about you. And it's very difficult to do, and people react against it because they don't like the idea of the whole world being a bunch of mysteries walking around, because that sounds terrifying. But it's like, that's actually exciting, and the more you know somebody, the more you need to be committed to thinking of them as a mystery. Like, let's find things you don't even know about yourself. And like, we started our relationship with me, open to whatever you really are. So let's keep delving into it. I don't know. That's my little rant. Sorry, I'm a bit of a ranter.
It's a good thing to be ranting about.
Yeah, it's a good thing to be thinking about, and it's one of the reasons that I've intentionally had people who represent different genders and gender expressions on the show, because I think it's really important. And so I want to get back, though, if we can, just to your story after conversion therapy. Maybe just fill in the gap between then and now.
Well, I read a book called Open Secret, and I think that I just took that and ran with it. Like, I was like, I will be open to people who I choose. I'll be open to my inner circle. I'll be open to my family. But then to everybody else, they don't need to know. So if a fan was like, are you gay? I'd be like, no, I just felt like, and the reaction used to be like, if I'd say no, they'd be like, oh my God, you're such a good actor. But if I said, yeah, they'd be like, I knew it. No one else could have did that but a gay person, or whatever. And, like, I guess giving away my ability for time or nuance or, anything, like, so it was just sort of just like, well, I guess I'm more talented if I pretend that I sleep with women, it just was, it was. And, I'm 6'4", I'm a big dude. I have always played like a bully or a wimp. It's just like, those are the kind of roles that like somebody who's abnormally sized for a young age would go up for. There aren't, tons of like leading men giants out there, so it was kind of like, I was either the tough guy or the wimp. And a lot of times not the wimp, because I'm not short. It's another trope that they wanted from me that I didn't possess.
Yeah.
So I think that I was told I was going to lose a lot of opportunity out on a lot of roles if people knew that I was gay. What's the point? I wasn't famous enough early on in my career for people to be asking questions or following me around or anything. And, so I had a good few years where I worked in gay clubs as a bouncer and a barback and a doorman and a coat check, and really like worked in nightlife and a promoter, and was able to just see what that was all about, and really kind of like fall into like my most promiscuous phase, drug experiment, do all these other kind of things. And then when I got Mean Girls, I was like, I'm going to LA. I'm going to start a different life. Like, at that point I had already, dealt with, my drug experimentation. I'd already like come to terms with the fact that I was 100% gay, most likely. I was still having these like, uh, bi-romantic feelings sometimes for women, which was very confusing for me. But actually, I've been thinking a lot lately about in the near future doing something like writing an op-ed like to all the women I loved before, and like writing some kind of op-ed, because I really feel like when it led to the point that I did finally come out publicly, that some of the women were like, what? Like, because I had, I wasn't lying to them, or I wasn't using them, and I don't want them to ever feel that way. And I still think that I have some splaining to do, kind of thing.
Right. Something to get
And
out.
yeah. And so but anyway, at some point it all led up to this point where I had done everything I could do to sort of hide my sexuality. I Spit on Your Grave, where I played like this rapist, and I was trying to do things that were like the completely opposite of the role that I had played in Mean Girls. The complete opposite of that, just to sort of like bookend my career and show my abilities. And I had done it, and it hadn't really done much for me. And I was turning down some really good gay roles, because at this point, as 10 years had gone by, like we started to write some really, the world started to write some really terrific gay parts. And so I was like, man, I feel prouder playing a role like that, or a role like that, or a role like that. And I had already, but when I started out my career, it wasn't like I said, I don't want to play gay roles. It was like, I said, I don't want to play gay for gay's sake, and I don't want to play fat for fat's sake. Like if my character's like, I'm fat, and he's just sitting there, and the laugh is that he's eating a sandwich out of from his pocket, I'm not interested,
Right.
And I remember turning down things that were like that, and I did the same thing for gay roles. If I felt like I was in fishnet stockings and doing something that came across as oddly transphobic or something, I would say no, And so a lot of times I remember I even have an agent say to me, who do you think you are? Say, no, you can't even like freaking pay your rent right now, But I was thinking long term. I was on the long term goal. I still am, which is why I do stand up. I know that this hasn't been a very funny like conversation on my end, but I think like, because we're talking about something that's very near and dear to me, but like, I spend my life being funny. Like I go out and I'm doing stand up all the time, and like that makes me that affords me a good enough career that I don't have to do a movie yet until I find the movie that I really want to do again, or I find the TV show that I really want to do again. Because I've learned as an adult to take charge of my career, but that comes with the privilege of having the money to be able to do so. Like a lot of people's issues and a lot of people's depressions are all like derivative from fiscal responsibilities and the oppression of having to work for a living wage. And I think it's really bad for an actor. There's nothing lower if you think of the lowest profession you could think of, there's nothing lower in Hollywood than an out of work actor. Nobody cares about you.
Right.
Like it's literally like you can't be anything lower. So it was like, trying to figure out a way, and they say that actors are only really happy between the moments of action and cut, and those were such fleeting moments. I couldn't make my life live for that anymore.
You had no control over whether or not you got a ton of that work either.
Sure. Or if the work you got was going to be good, because you're just hoping to be able to pay the rent. Like it was a very different thing, and Hollywood is really messed up. I mean, so many things contributed to that too. Like in 2008, like the crash, and then also, writer strikes and streaming, which they never renegotiated residuals for. Like in the 80s, if you're on one TV show, you could buy a house. And then like we don't get residuals from streaming because the last time residuals were negotiated was before streaming was invented. And so all the money keeps going to the people on the top, and so a lot of that fueled my depression, because I was like, I need to buy my mom a house. I need to survive. I need to start a family. And I'm not going to do these things if I'm gay. I'm not going to be awarded these things if I'm gay. I don't have health insurance because I'm gay, because I can't. So I have to pretend I'm straight, and then I just got to this point where I didn't even care anymore if I wanted to do that or not. And at the 10th anniversary of Mean Girls, I got a letter from someone that said, I don't know if you're gay or not, but it doesn't really matter, because I'm a big fan, because when you were in when I was in 8th grade, I got beat up for being chubby and tortured for being a sissy. And then your movie came out. And then in 9th grade, on my first day of my freshman year, the popular senior girl said, "You're like Damien, come sit with us." And you made me popular and protected for 4 years. And I know that it was you. And at first I started being embarrassed that they were calling me that, but now I wear it as a badge of pride that I'm a Damien. And like, I'm so privileged to have someone in media that I could look up to and say, "That's me," and be proud. So thank you. And man, that was so emotional for me.
Yeah,
And
wow,
so
I'm feeling a
powerful.
little emotional just thinking about it. That is so
Because
beautiful.
I didn't have it. I didn't have someone that I could say, "That's me." Like, if I saw a fat person on screen, they were a joke. If I saw a queer person on TV, their head was dunked in a toilet.
Yeah.
And I remember the Toxic Avenger being called the faggot and being like beat up till he was almost dead, and then became the toxic and dumped into toxic waste, which is how he became the Toxic Avenger. Like,
Really?
I mean,
I
yeah,
didn't remember that.
I didn't forget it.
Yeah.
I even went back and watched Keanu Reeves in Bill and Ted, because the new Bill and Ted adventure came out, and then in the first Bill and Ted they kiss and then they break apart and go fag. Like, and I was like, this is the stuff that I was hearing. If you go back and watch Eddie Murphy's Delirious, which I watched, I don't even know how many times, "You don't got no ice cream," like I watched that over and over and over again, and forgot how much he talked about how he doesn't want his girlfriend to have any gay best friends because he doesn't want any AIDS. Like, and you forget that this is the stuff that was like ingrained in our brains over and over again.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just come from the church, but it came from society.
Yeah.
And so many different things were affected by it. Even the look of men, our movie stars, Robert Mitchum didn't have to have a Chris Pratt body.
Right.
But it became that way because gay people wanted to appear healthy, so they didn't appear like they had HIV, and so they took steroids, which made the bodybuilding community have to step it up even further to not look gay. And then it became like this whole thing where everyone became so obsessed with their body image that they had to create a term metrosexual just so it was okay for guys to trim and wear cologne,
right?
Like, and work out. And then it became so obsessive, which I remember in the early noughties, especially, like the nauseating thing of being at a gay pool party where everyone's like, "I feel fat. What's your workout regimen? How much boiled chicken do you eat?" Like, constantly being obsessed with their size and everything else, to now dad bods are in, because some people are thinking maybe mental health actually is a bigger exhibitor of health than somebody who's constantly freaking obsessed with eating disorders and steroids and everything else to stay in shape. So all of this is derivative from gay stigma and HIV stigma. There's so many things that were wrapped around it's all interlinked, and a lot of it comes from church. A lot of it comes from the church. Like right before, like 1981, Paramount put out a movie called Partners, which was about a cop who has to go undercover with a gay guy who works in the clerical part of the police station. And these two cops, one gay and one not, have to live together and pretend to be a gay couple in the gay neighborhood to find like a murderer. I mean, that was like a major cop gay buddy comedy. Maybe it was a little bit homophobic in its telling, but for 1981, super progressive. And then what happens right around 1983, 1984, we get the AIDS crisis, and you never see that again. It never happens. Gay people get washed off of television. Well, and it wasn't until the 90s when people were able to have better chance of living with the cocktails of medicines and stuff that they were creating, like AZT and other things. Were we able to see gay people have real lives on television again? And a lot of it came from reality TV, like Pedro Zamora and other people who broke ground, and not just for HIV people. But I'm negative, but but as a young gay person, seeing a gay person on television, that was so impactful for me. And Pedro Zamora on The Real World was probably the first time I really identified with any gay person.
It's interesting. I don't think you can really look at America, and I live in Canada. It's the same thing up here, without kind of recognizing the effect of this community and the effect of the way the community has been treated, because it's clear that it's not a small number of people, right? It's not, we are not, as much as people want to say it's like this tiny minority. We want it, like it's just obvious, and we're really all missing out, I think, because like I say, like, there's something so enjoyable about listening to Yass Jesus, because it's a whole energy that has been barred from the church. And it's not even like the energy that you have on the show has to be exhibited by gay people. It's boisterous, it's irreverent. There's lots of things that we can't do in the church because they're a little gay, like
Right.
which
Well,
is
our freaking Deacon Ross Murray, who's one of the producers of our show,
yeah.
said to us, he was like, "Why do you think the Catholic Church is so gay? Why do you think there's velvet curtains and and stained glass windows and gilded thrones and gowns and incense purses?" I'm like,
Fancy hat.
it's so true. He's like, because a lot of like the whole Italian trope was you have 5 sons and one of them's gay and one of them's a priest. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, this one's the doctor, this one's the lawyer, this one's the carpenter, this one's the plumber, and that one's the priest.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the lesbians and gays hid in the church in these celibate roles.
Yeah.
That was their solace. So
And with a genuine faith too. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah,
but
no.
With a genuine faith and a yearning, because I feel like there's got to be a yearning, because you feel like life is incomplete for you, and so they put their yearning and longing into God and into community. But it's also like cancerous to keep the secret inside and have no intimacy.
Saint Francis of Assisi also said, like, he told the monks to mother each other, because there was such a thing about toxic masculinity within the church. Like that what he meant was be sensitive. Like, vulnerability is dope. Like, it's like just trying to get in touch with your feminine side, or just trying to be like a fully realized human being with sensitivity and empathy. Like, and so I think that a lot of that got convoluted into I don't know what.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm down here in Florida right now, taking care of my mom, and I'm just driving around looking at a bunch of like truck mudding, like, like I ride for Jesus kind of people who just are not getting it right. Some of those lives are so ingrained in the whole gender reveal party of it all. Like, the whole kind of like energy is just off from what it means to be a living, breathing, multidimensional human.
Yeah. And if you ever get into those masculine cultures, which church can unfortunately be in some strange way, you'll always notice 1 or 2 people who you're like, this is an act for you, and everybody's, well, I'm not saying they're gay necessarily, but they could be. Like, one of my big turning points was, in the 90s, every young Christian man had their gay guy imitation. Like, they had their way that they do the gay voice. And I had one too. And it was totally acceptable in a group of guys sitting around from church to do their gay voice. And I noticed that my one friend, and he's still one of my closest friends, very slight guy, very sensitive, wouldn't laugh at these things. And so I really awkwardly asked him one day if he was gay in the car driving, staring ahead, and not. Actually, I think I said, "Do you struggle with homosexuality?"
Right.
Because they wouldn't have said, "Are you gay?"
I struggle getting laid all the time. No,
yeah, exactly. But then he was like, he said no, and he's not. He's married with kids. I mean, I trust him that he's not, but he said no, but he really appreciated that I asked, and I think it made our friendship come closer together. But it's like that kind of thing was so like taboo. And then and I had a gay roommate come out during that time when he was my roommate, and he went to our church, and it was like, you want to support them, but you can't say it. You can't say that stuff out loud, really. So you just be like, "I'm here for you," like, and then like, but you're peeking out the curtains. Who's picking him up? Who's he driving off with, and all this stupid stuff. And it's like, man, why? It would be so great if in the church we could just like do what Jesus did and just be present with people, and not say like, "Hey, what are you doing wrong?" But just like, "Hey, who are you?"
A big thing of it is visibility, which is why I'm sure that there's going to be someone that doesn't want to hire me for some movie because I do Yass Jesus at some point. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sure that there's someone that thinks that what I'm doing is wrong. That's fine. I don't want to work with that person anyway, but I feel like when I grew up, like, and I love my friend Matt, but when I grew up and I went to college, the one gay kid that was in my school had a pride flag canopy above his bed. And that was so intense for me. It didn't identify who I was, and so like for me it was like, well, that's gay, so what am I, and so it was just like there had to be one kind of gay,
Yeah,
because
gay is one thing.
because a lot of people don't have the luxury of code switching. I'm an actor, so I could code switch, and also I think I naturally lean somewhere in the middle. But like I feel like uh for some people who do lean more on the feminization side of the spectrum, who can't hide who they are, who don't have the ability, who don't have the privilege of being able to hide who they are, who don't have the mass or the size that I have and the height that I have to maybe, and if I keep my mouth shut and walk on the street, I could feel a little more protective. I mean, I lived in, major metropolitan cities most of my life, and I never once got mugged. And then I have a lot of twink friends who got mugged 3 times, so to me, it's like, there are people, we do have some privilege, but I think the more visible you are, like the more I do things, or the more I put myself in the public eye, or the more I do your podcast, or anything else, it's a win for somebody who could see themselves and say,
Yeah,
okay, now I'm okay with feeling comfortable. I just needed to see someone like me, and I wasn't, so I had to be the person to be seen.
yeah,
And it's so weird how that happens like that, how
yeah.
uncomfortable it was, for me to do that kind of stuff. It took a lot of growing pains.
Well, I applaud it big time, because I have a lot of gay friends and stuff, and you hear people saying like, not everybody wants to be the point of the spear. Like, not everybody wants to be the person who sticks their head up and says something.
Well, because the trailblazers get the arrows and not the land,
That's fair
you
enough.
know.
And there's almost like a Moses entering the promised land kind of thing. Moses didn't really get there, and like there's a sacrificial element to paving the way for other people, and it's a big value on this podcast, because like for me personally, I mean, I don't do this podcast as a Christian thing, or to get people to like overtly acknowledge God, but my general idea is that if you can't look at yourself and look at another person, like in this way where I'm saying, like, where there's mystery, there's unknown, there's more potential, there's things to know. If you can't look at yourself and the people near you that way, you won't know God either. Because I mean, God is, however mysterious you are, and getting to know you and all of your undiscovered beauty, God is more. Like that's what God is entirely to us. And
I
so,
think
yeah.
the last straw for us with the Yass Jesus podcast, beginning it, I mean, was Azariah and I went to the RuPaul's Drag Race finale, and everybody was like dressed so fun and so creatively and expressing themselves, and everyone was like screaming for the queens, like, and for Ru especially. And I was like, this is church right now. Like, so many of these kids went to church when they were growing up. So many of these people as kids went to church and had to leave that behind in order to experience this. But imagine if you could combine the two. Like, imagine if we could all like whoop and holler and have a good time and like sashay for the Lord. Like, it felt like so like the thought of that felt so freeing and fun.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to go to church every Sunday if church was like the RuPaul's Drag Race finale.
That's amazing. And actually, what occurs to me is like, I've been thinking about the transfiguration story, because I don't really understand it. The one with Jesus' face transfigured on the mountaintop, glowing. And what occurs to me when you're saying that is that in a way, a person in drag is not necessarily hiding who they are behind makeup. They are actually revealing a part of themselves that has been hidden and that there's been no way to show. And it is like, and what these people in the audience are seeing is a bunch of transfiguration, in a way, is a bunch of like, oh, here's a beautiful thing that's been inside me, that hasn't been able to come out. And that is church. I mean, I wouldn't even say it's like, you didn't say like.
Yeah, RuPaul says that drag doesn't hide who you are, it reveals who you are. So you're right on point with that. Like, I think it's like an opportunity for people to step outside of the vessel that they have curated. And I think that in itself is divine, because you're looking at another level of potential of what God might have in store for you had you chosen different choose your own adventure pages along the way.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think we're at an hour and 15. That's probably a good note to end on.
Yeah, well, we chose the good adventure, I think.
Yeah, and thank you so much. I mean, this was obviously generous on your behalf to be on this and talk to me today. So I really appreciate it, and I'm gonna keep doing what I can to get stories like yours out there, because it's inspiring.
Well, please, I encourage everyone listening to this to go to yassjesuspod.com and leave us a prayer request, just something that if you want us to pray for you, or leave us a praise report if you're very grateful for something and you want us to hallelujah for you. It would be great to leave it there, or just say hi, like say, hey, I'm an affirming straight person, or I am a queer person who doesn't know God anymore. What should I do? Like, ask us questions. Like, we're here, and I encourage you, please also leave us a message on there, something we could play, like I think people just need to hear other voices and get some inspiration. So I'd love for you to return the favor and leave us a little message on the website.
I will, yeah. And I love how at the beginning you say sinners, saints, and I don't know if I is or I ain't, which is so good. It's like it's like everybody come on in. So yeah, really appreciate your work.
That's it. Kings and queens and in-betweens. Like, it doesn't matter really. Like, I think we all, like, God doesn't need perfect people. If you're perfect, you don't need God. So, it's all of us imperfects. That's what we're there for.
Amen.